Be my victim.
In 1992, horror was evolving, getting smarter, digging deeper into social issues that mainstream cinema avoided. While most horror films were content with cheap scares and forgettable villains, Candyman arrived like a fever dream, beautiful, terrifying, and unapologetically political. Based on Clive Barker's short story, The Forbidden, this film transformed a British tale into something uniquely American, relocating the horror from Liverpool to Chicago's notorious Cabrini-Green housing projects. What director Bernard Rose and his team accomplished wasn't just scary, it was revolutionary. And the stories behind the making of this film, they're just as intense as anything that made it to screen. Fact number 1. Let's start with something that'll make your skin crawl. The bees in Candyman weren't CGI. They weren't animatronics. They were real. Over 200,000 real honeybees were used throughout production, and they were carefully bred to be newborn bees, about 12 hours old, so their stingers would be less powerful, but they'd still look fully grown on camera. Think about what that means for a second. While most horror films in the 90s were starting to experiment with digital effects and safer alternatives, Candyman went old school in the most terrifying way possible. The production hired Norman Gary, a renowned entomology professor from UC Davis who'd previously worked on films like My Girl and Fried Green Tomatoes. He was the bee whisperer of Hollywood, and Candyman needed his expertise desperately. Gary used synthesized queen bee pheromone to keep the bees calm during filming. The crew wore full bodysuits for protection, but that didn't stop almost everyone from getting stung at least once during production. There was even a special low-suction bee vacuum designed to safely gather the bees between takes without harming them. But no amount of preparation could completely eliminate the danger, and the actors knew it every single day they stepped on set. Fact number 2. Tony Todd, the man who brought Candyman to life with that impossibly deep voice and commanding presence, was smart about the risk he was taking. Before signing on, he negotiated something brilliant into his contract, a bonus of $1,000 for every bee sting he received during filming. And he wasn't playing around with that clause either. By the time production wrapped, Todd had been stung 23 times. Do the math. That's $23,000 in bonuses on top of his regular salary. In interviews years later, Todd would laugh about it, saying he had a great lawyer and everything worth making involves some sort of pain. But there's something deeper there too. Todd understood that his suffering would translate to authenticity on screen. Every wince, every moment of genuine discomfort that audiences see, that's real. And here's the wildest part. Todd would go on to appear in 2 more Candyman sequels, enduring more bee stings in both. The role defined his career, made him a horror icon, and earned him a small fortune in bee sting bonuses along the way. That's dedication to the craft that goes way beyond what most actors would even consider. Fact number 3. If you thought covering yourself in bees was intense, wait until you hear about what Tony Todd agreed to for one particular scene. There's a moment in the film where Candyman opens his mouth and bees pour out, a truly nightmarish image that's become one of the movie's most iconic shots. And yes, Todd actually did that. For that scene, Todd wore a dental dam, a thin protective barrier to prevent bees from sliding down his throat. Then they placed live bees directly into his mouth. Think about the level of trust that requires. You're an actor, you're in character, and you've got hundreds of living insects in your mouth that could sting you at any moment. The dental dam offered some protection, but it wasn't foolproof. Todd still suffered stings during that sequence. Virginia Madsen, who played Helen, later talked about how difficult it was just being near the bees, even with all the safety precautions. She remembered that after scenes where bees covered her face and head, it would take both her and Todd about 45 minutes just to get all the bees off using that special bee vacuum. She said sitting still during that process was the hardest part, but she felt like a total badass for doing it. That's the spirit that made Candyman special. Everyone involved was willing to push boundaries to create something genuinely unsettling. Fact number 4. Here's something that could have been a disaster. Virginia Madsen, the film's lead actress, was actually allergic to bees. Read that again. The star of a movie featuring over 200,000 real bees had a bee allergy. That's why the production went through such elaborate measures to use newborn bees with less powerful stingers, and why they had medical personnel on standby throughout filming. Madsen knew about her allergy going in, but she wanted the role badly enough that she was willing to face that fear. Bernard Rose, the director, has talked about how her vulnerability in those bee scenes is partially genuine fear mixed with brilliant acting. You can see it in her eyes. That's not just Helen Lyle being terrified of Candyman. That's Virginia Madsen being genuinely afraid of what could happen if things went wrong. The fact that Madsen pushed through that allergy to deliver such a powerful performance speaks to the commitment everyone had to this project. Horror often gets dismissed as a lesser genre, something that doesn't require real acting. But Madsen was out there risking an allergic reaction, facing a legitimate phobia, all while maintaining her character's emotional arc. That's serious craft. Fact number 5. Now let's talk about something that haunts this film in a completely different way. The real-life unaliving that inspired one of Candyman's most disturbing scenes. In the movie, there's this chilling moment where Helen discovers that a killer could have entered a victim's apartment through the medicine cabinet. That wasn't fiction. That was based on the actual unaliving of Ruthie Mae McCoy in a Chicago housing project in 1987. On April 22nd of that year, 52-year-old Ruthie Mae McCoy called 911 in a panic, saying people were trying to break into her apartment through the bathroom. The dispatcher didn't understand what she meant. How could someone come through a bathroom? They recorded it as a disturbance rather than a break-in, and police didn't respond with urgency. Neighbors called to report gunshots. Still, when officers finally arrived nearly 30 minutes later, they knocked on her locked door and left when no one answered. 2 days later, McCoy was found shot multiple times in her bedroom. The killers had indeed entered through her medicine cabinet. The building's design had medicine cabinets installed back-to-back with only a 2-foot pipe chase between apartments, held in place by just 6 flimsy nails. Criminals in the building had been exploiting this design flaw for over a year, breaking into apartments through these cabinets. Director Bernard Rose read about McCoy's unaliving in a Chicago Reader article while researching the film, and he knew he had to incorporate it. In the film, the victim's name is changed to Ruthie Jean, and Helen's investigation of that unaliving becomes a central plot point. It's a tribute to McCoy, but it's also a stark reminder that the real horror isn't supernatural. It's systemic neglect, architectural failures in public housing, and a society that failed to protect its most vulnerable residents. Fact number 6. Candyman's greatest triumph and biggest risk was filming on location at the actual Cabrini-Green housing projects in Chicago. In 1992, Cabrini-Green was one of the most notorious public housing developments in America, plagued by poverty, gang violence, and systemic neglect. It was real, it was dangerous, and it was exactly where Bernard Rose wanted to film. The production spent 3 days shooting exteriors, hallways, and stairways at Cabrini-Green, though most interior apartment scenes were filmed on sound stages in Los Angeles. But getting permission to film there wasn't as simple as asking the city. The area was controlled by rival gangs, and the filmmakers had to negotiate directly with gang members to ensure the cast and crew's safety. The solution? Hire local gang members as extras and pay the gangs for security. It was an arrangement that benefited everyone. The gangs earned legitimate money, local residents got paid work, and the production gained access to authentic locations that gave the film its gritty realism. Tony Todd and Virginia Madsen even went into the buildings with plainclothes law enforcement to research their roles, a useful but deeply distressing experience for both actors. What made this approach revolutionary was that Rose didn't treat Cabrini-Green as just a backdrop for horror. He showed the humanity of the residents, the systemic failures that created these conditions, and the way urban legends become coping mechanisms for people living through real-world nightmares. The film doesn't exploit Cabrini-Green. It honors it, challenges it, and forces viewers to confront why places like this exist in wealthy America. Fact number 7. Even with all the security arrangements and gang cooperation, danger was always lurking. On the very last day of filming at Cabrini-Green, a sniper fired a shot that went straight through the production van. Miraculously, nobody was injured, but it was a stark reminder that they were working in an environment where violence could erupt at any moment. The fact that this happened on the final day feels almost cinematic in its timing, like the projects themselves were giving the production one last warning. The cast and crew had successfully navigated 3 days of filming in one of America's most dangerous neighborhoods, built relationships with residents, employed local people, and created something meaningful. And then, just as they were wrapping, reality intervened with a bullet. This incident never made it into the film's promotional materials at the time, but it became part of Candyman's legend. It proved that the danger in the movie wasn't exaggerated. If anything, the film captured only a fraction of what daily life was like for Cabrini-Green residents. That sniper's bullet is a reminder that for the cast and crew, this was a temporary visit to a dangerous location. For the people who lived there, this was home, and the threat of violence was constant. Fact number 8. Bernard Rose had a problem. He hated the sound of screaming in horror movies. In interviews promoting Candyman, he called typical horror movie screaming an absolutely horrible noise. So he made an unconventional choice. Instead of having Helen scream hysterically whenever she encountered Candyman, he wanted her to enter a trance-like state. To achieve this, Rose and Virginia Madsen went to see a professional hypnotist. Together, they developed a technique where Rose could use specific words to trigger Madsen into a genuine trance state while filming. Before shooting confrontation scenes with Candyman, Rose would spend about 10 minutes preparing Madsen, using the hypnotist's methods to put her into that altered state of consciousness. The result is something truly unique in horror cinema. Watch Madsen's performance closely during her encounters with Candyman. There's a dreamy quality to her reactions, a sense of being caught between terror and seduction. She's not screaming and running. She's mesmerized, almost willing. It makes their dynamic more complex, more psychologically interesting than a typical victim-stalker relationship. The hypnosis wasn't just a gimmick. It fundamentally changed how the horror functions in the film, making it feel more like a dark fairy tale than a slasher movie. Fact number 9. Here's a detail that perfectly captures the film's themes of history, pain, and symbolism. The production needed a hook for Candyman's severed hand, the film's most iconic prop. The first hook they commissioned was made by a Christian blacksmith who agreed to create it. But when he learned what it was for, that it would be used in a horror film, he refused to hand it over. Think about the irony there. A craftsman creates something dark and violent, but draws the line at having it associated with horror cinema. It forced the production to find another blacksmith willing to make the hook, which became one of the film's most recognizable images. That hook isn't just a weapon, it's a symbol of Candyman's lynching, his mutilation, the violence inflicted on him because he loved a white woman. Bob Keane, the special effects designer, initially tried having Tony Todd wear a machine-controlled fake arm, but the movements felt too stiff and unnatural. The hook was the solution: simple, brutal, effective. Todd could control it naturally, making Candyman's gestures feel both elegant and threatening. That first blacksmith who refused to participate in the film's darkness inadvertently contributed to its power. Sometimes the obstacles we face in creating art end up making the art stronger. Fact number 10. Casting Candyman could have gone in a radically different direction. Before Tony Todd was cast, Eddie Murphy was actually considered for the role. Yes, that Eddie Murphy, the comedy superstar who was one of the biggest movie stars in the world at the time. But there were two problems. First, Murphy was deemed too short for the imposing physical presence they wanted Candyman to have. Second, and more importantly, the production simply couldn't afford him. In the early 90s, Murphy commanded enormous salaries, having just come off hits like Coming to America and Harlem Nights. A low-budget horror film couldn't compete with his price tag. But in retrospect, Murphy not getting the role was the best thing that could have happened. No disrespect to Murphy's talent, but it's impossible to imagine anyone other than Tony Todd as Candyman. Todd brought something Murphy couldn't have. That deep, resonant voice that sounds like it's coming from beyond the grave. The physical presence that made Candyman feel genuinely otherworldly, and the willingness to endure actual bees for authenticity. Todd was a classically trained actor who understood horror and respected the genre. He made Candyman tragic, romantic, and terrifying all at once. The role made him an icon, and the film became something far more sophisticated than it might have been with a big-name comedy star. Fact number 11. Bernard Rose understood that for Candyman and Helen's relationship to work, and yes, it is a relationship, a twisted romance, the actors needed to develop real chemistry. So before filming began, he had Tony Todd and Virginia Madsen take ballroom dancing and fencing classes together, not for specific scenes, but to create a physical intimacy and trust between them. These classes served multiple purposes. Ballroom dancing requires trust. You're holding someone, moving in sync, anticipating their movements. It's intimate without being sexual, elegant without being stiff. Fencing teaches you to read your opponent, to move together in a kind of violent ballet. Both activities created a dynamic between Todd and Madsen that translated perfectly to their on-screen relationship. Watch their scenes together, and you'll see what those classes accomplished. There's a choreography to their interactions, a sense that they're dancing around each other, even when they're standing still. Candyman doesn't just stalk Helen, he courts her. She doesn't just fear him, she's drawn to him. That complexity came from the trust and familiarity Todd and Madsen built through those shared physical activities. It's the kind of thoughtful preparation that separates good films from great ones, and it shows in every frame they share. Fact number 12. Virginia Madsen almost didn't play Helen at all. Here's how close we came to a completely different movie. Madsen was originally cast as Bernadette, Helen's friend. Alexandra Pigg, who was Bernard Rose's wife at the time, was set to play the lead role of Helen. But when the production decided to make Bernadette's character African American to better reflect the Chicago setting, Madsen lost her role entirely. Then fate intervened. Alexandra Pigg became pregnant shortly before production was scheduled to begin, and she couldn't do the film. Pigg herself suggested that Madsen take over as Helen, and suddenly, Madsen went from being cut from the project to carrying the entire film on her shoulders. And if Madsen hadn't been available or interested, the producer's backup plan was a young TV actress who was relatively unknown at the time. Sandra Bullock. Think about that alternate timeline for a second. Sandra Bullock as Helen Lyle, facing down Tony Todd's Candyman. It's not that Bullock couldn't have done it. She's proven herself as a versatile actress countless times. But Madsen brought something specific to the role, a vulnerability mixed with intellectual curiosity that defined Helen's character. In interviews years later, Madsen has said that Candyman is the film she's most recognized for, especially at airports. It became her Halloween movie, her legacy, the role that gave her the kind of annual cultural relevance that most actors dream of. Fact number 13. There's another tragic real-life parallel in Candyman that viewers might not catch. In the film, there's a heartbreaking scene where a character named Matthew gets killed by a group of children in Cabrini-Green. That scene wasn't just fictional horror. It was based on an actual event that occurred in a New York City housing project. The details of that real incident are painful. Children, products of environments where violence is normalized, committing an act that should be unthinkable. Bernard Rose included this scene not for shock value, but to illustrate how systemic poverty and trauma create cycles of violence that consume even the youngest and most innocent. When children become perpetrators, something has gone catastrophically wrong in the structures meant to protect them. This is what separates Candyman from typical horror. Rose wasn't interested in random violence or senseless scares. Every death in the film, every act of horror, is connected to larger social issues. Racism, poverty, the failure of public institutions, the trauma that gets passed down through generations. Matthew's death is shocking, not because of how it's filmed, but because it forces us to confront what happens when we abandon entire communities and then act surprised when violence erupts. Fact number 14. One of Candyman's greatest strengths is its score, composed by Philip Glass. If you're not familiar with Glass, he's a legendary minimalist composer, one of the most influential figures in contemporary classical music. His score for Candyman is hypnotic, building tension through repetition and subtle variations rather than bombastic orchestral hits. It's the only horror film score Glass has ever composed, which makes it even more special. Here's the fascinating part. Glass initially didn't like the finished film. When he was composing the score, he envisioned something more artful, a sophisticated adaptation of Clive Barker's short story. What he saw in the completed film felt, in his words, like a low-budget slasher. He was disappointed that his music was attached to what he perceived as something less elevated than he'd hoped. But time has been kind to both the film and Glass's opinion of it. His score is now recognized as one of the great horror film soundtracks, and Glass himself has softened his stance over the years. The music does exactly what Bernard Rose needed it to do. It makes Candyman feel mythic rather than mundane, transforms urban decay into gothic romance, and keeps viewers in a state of sustained unease. That repetitive building quality that defines Glass's minimalist style perfectly captures the obsessive nature of urban legends and how they burrow into our consciousness. Fact number 15. Let's end with what makes Candyman resonate beyond just being a great horror film. The Candyman legend itself is a variation on urban legends we've all heard, particularly Bloody Mary. You say a name multiple times in front of a mirror, and a supernatural entity appears. It's a ritual that's both terrifying and irresistible, playing on our fear of what might actually happen if we complete that chant. But Candyman transforms that simple urban legend into something far more profound. This isn't just a ghost story. It's about how marginalized communities create myths to process trauma, how legends can be both protective and dangerous, and how the act of belief itself has power. Candyman exists because people need him to exist, because giving a name and face to random violence makes it slightly less terrifying than acknowledging that bad things happen for no reason at all. The film taps into something primal about storytelling and belief. We know Bloody Mary isn't real, but how many of us have started that chant and stopped just before the final repetition, not quite willing to test whether we're right? Candyman weaponizes that hesitation, that tiny doubt that maybe, just maybe, there's something to these legends. And by making Candyman's origin story rooted in real historical racism, a Black artist lynched for loving a white woman, the film connects supernatural horror to actual American horror, making it impossible to enjoy the scares without confronting the real-world violence that inspired them. Candyman wasn't just another early 90s horror film competing with Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees for box office dollars. It was something rarer, a film that used horror to examine race, class, and urban decay without sacrificing genuine scares or compelling storytelling. Bernard Rose, Tony Todd, Virginia Madsen, and the entire team created something that would influence horror cinema for decades to come. From those 200,000 real bees to the dangerous streets of Cabrini-Green, from Philip Glass's haunting score to the tragic real-life unaliving of Ruthie Mae McCoy, every element of Candyman's production was touched by both artistry and authenticity. The cast and crew endured bee stings, navigated gang-controlled territory, experimented with hypnosis, and pushed boundaries in ways that most productions wouldn't dare. The result was a film that transcended its genre. Jordan Peele has cited it as a major influence on Get Out and Us. The 2021 sequel, directed by Nia DaCosta and produced by Peele, brought the legend back for a new generation while honoring everything that made the original special. Virginia Madsen became synonymous with Halloween for an entire generation of fans. Tony Todd became a horror icon whose commanding voice and presence defined an era. But more than any of that, Candyman proved that horror could be intelligent, political, and beautiful all at once. It showed that the genre could tackle serious social issues without becoming preachy or losing its ability to terrify. It demonstrated that respecting your audience's intelligence and confronting uncomfortable truths doesn't diminish horror, it amplifies it. 33 years after its release, Candyman remains essential viewing, not just because it's scary, though it absolutely is, but because it dared to say something meaningful while scaring us. It used supernatural horror to illuminate real horror, used a ghost story to talk about racism and poverty, and proved that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones we create through our own cruelty and neglect. That's the legacy of Candyman. That's why these 15 facts matter, because they reveal a film made with courage, crafted with intention, and designed to haunt us long after the credits roll. And 3 decades later, if you say his name 5 times in the mirror, you're not just summoning a ghost. You're participating in a cultural ritual that connects us to questions about belief, fear, and the stories we tell ourselves about the darkness in the world around us. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the classic film horror Candyman, don't forget to like this video, share it with other fans, and subscribe to our channel for more wild facts about your favorite urban horror films. Hit that notification bell so you never miss another upload. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.